Godspeed, John Glenn. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
I know you're here tonight to hear from John Glenn, so let's get to that. Our good friend Senator Sherrod Brown invited and encouraged Senator Glenn to do this evening. So we're going to ask Senator Brown to take the honors of the introduction. Senator Sherrod Brown was instrumental in helping us move the NASA Glenn Visitor Center here to the Science Center. So please join me in a great welcome for our senator, my senator, Senator Sherrod Brown.
Linda, welcome back. Nice, okay. Paul, thank you, and thank you for your service to this community at the Great Lakes Science Center and so much else, and your leadership. Thanks to Connie's and my longtime friends, Mark and Buffy, and Tom and Anna, thank you for your leadership on this too, and your work to make this event happen. And special thanks, of course, to two of our favorite people, Annie and John Glenn. Thank you. I was 10 years old when John Glenn, observed 3 sunsets, 3 sunrises, and the wonder of the universe in just under 5 hours while circling the Earth. I was 16 years old when Colonel John Glenn came to Mansfield, Ohio, and presented me and about 25 other Boy Scouts with their Eagle Scout Awards. John, this is not to impress upon this crowd our age difference, to be sure, because when I was 54 years old, in one of the most memorable moments of my professional life, and as Annie and Connie sat in the gallery together, John Glenn escorted me down the aisle to be sworn in to the United States Senate. Throughout my adult life, John Glenn has inspired me to think about a life well lived, and I don't think there's any term to describe better Annie and John than lives well lived. The value of life in public service, the value of fighting for the public good. We all know his accomplishments. When his country was attacked, John Glenn enlisted. When his country needed it, John Glenn instilled a confidence in the American spirit of scientific discovery. When his state and his country needed his leadership, he represented the people of Ohio with honor. But whether he was flying a fighter jet with Ted Williams on his wing, and no offense, John, I hate the Red Sox almost as much as I hate the Yankees, but when John Glenn was flying a fighter jet or a space shuttle, or walking the campaign trails or through the halls of the Senate, he remained grounded in his new Concord roots. Tonight's about the importance of science education, about inspiring our next generation of space pioneers. Tonight we celebrate John Glenn's role in that of the Great Lakes Science Center and the NASA Glenn Visitor Center in this most important of national interests. But in celebrating one American treasure's legacy, John Glenn's, we also celebrate another Annie Glenn. And I took the liberty of asking my wife to write something brief tonight about Annie Glenn. Connie, as you know, is a pretty good writer, and I don't tell her what to write, she doesn't tell me how to vote, but I also did ask her tonight to share with this group a few words about Annie Glenn. Here's what Connie wrote. Annie Glenn refuses to draw attention to herself, which is one of the reasons so many of us can't get enough of her. She is that rare person who is genuinely interested in whoever is standing right in front of her. You will never catch her looking over your shoulder, searching for someone more interesting or more important. If you're looking into the eyes of Annie Glenn, you have just become the most fascinating person in the world. This is not to suggest that Annie is a wallflower. She has won many honors, changed many lives through her advocacy. She is engaging as she is generous, full of opinions earned by living life at full throttle, even when she was scared to death. And that is a crucial truth about Annie Glenn. Americans rightly coo and ah over John Glenn's courage in space, but let us never forget the hero of a wife who gave her public blessing and then privately prayed until his safe return. On April 6th, 1943, John and Annie married, and since then they've earned the adulation and admiration from people around the world for their devoted love and relationship. As children, they shared a playpen. John likes to say, I've only heard it 400 times, John likes to say, she was part of my life from the time of my first memory, and talks about sandboxes and all that. John saw Earth from space, we all know. But in the summer of 2009, with the famous Ann and Johnny's sense of adventure, they set out to explore America from the ground up. They spent weeks of unplanned, uninterrupted time together, traveling across our nation, just the two of them, not knowing from one day to the next necessarily where they were headed. Annie described, and still does, that summer, as she did to me tonight briefly, as a remarkable time for the two of them, where their love for each other and yearning for adventure was as strong as ever. It's a love and a marriage that everyone, from lifelong New Concord friends to United States presidents, have described with deepest attention, with deepest affection. Barack Obama said in 2008 during the campaign, and it's during a stop in Columbus, he said, "The thing I admire most about John Glenn is his relationship with Annie." They've been married for 65 years. Now it's 68, I guess. They've been married for 65 years. And you should see him the way he treats her. He's in love. 65 years later, he's still in love. And no wonder, because she is a remarkable woman. Through John and Annie's remarkable lives, we reveal and remember the greatness of our country, our capacity to love and to wonder, and most importantly, to see something greater than ourselves. And that's what we celebrate today, to reach for the stars and embrace that collective spirit of discovery. Connie and I are fortunate to call John and Annie friends, and they remain trusted mentors and role models for us and for so many in this room and for so many across the country. Next month marks John's 90th birthday, a life that shaped much of our history in the 20th century. And whether through the Glenn School at The Ohio State University or the work here at the Great Lakes Science Center and the NASA Glenn's Visitor Center, it's a life that will continue, both their lives are lives that will continue to shape our nation in the 21st century. It's my honor now to introduce a video of someone who also knew John Glenn up close and who recognized, quote, that our leadership in science and industry, our hopes for peace and security, require us to solve these mysteries and to solve them for the good of all men. Thank you.
There are milestones in human progress that mark recorded history. In my judgment, this nation's orbital pioneering in space is of such historic stature, representing as it does a vast advancement that will profoundly influence the progress of all mankind. It requires physical and moral stamina and a willingness to meet the dangers and the challenges of the future. John Glenn, throughout his life, has eloquently portrayed these great qualities and is an inspiration to all Americans.
Thank you. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. In particular, thank you, Sherrod and Connie. And Connie, thank you for your writing on that. I don't know how many people know she's a Pulitzer Prize-winning author to begin with, and those words were great. Thank you. Sherrod always knows how to make me feel really old, though. That Boy Scout thing when he was still just out of being a kid. I don't know about that one. And then I come tonight, and here the people that are putting on the whole thing tonight add to it by saying we're here to celebrate the legacy. Now that's like saying this is a memorial dinner that I'm going to speak at or something. But you know, this thing about getting older is something that I get a lot of emails on these days, and some of the jokes that come through are pretty good, and I would share a couple of them with you. One was about the elderly gentleman who left home, went to drive downtown, and he's gone about 10 minutes, and the car phone rings, and it's his wife, and she says, "Oh, Fred, please be careful. I just saw on TV where there's a car driving the wrong way on the freeway." And he said, "They're not one, there are hundreds of them." So things do change a little bit as you get older. But let me share with you just a moment here before I make a few short other remarks here, and then open this up for any questions you may have on this level here, and we'll say what they were here. That was suggested to me, and I'm very glad to do that. But let me tell you, this is not a joke I got by email. This is an actual letter, no joke, that I received from a boy in Illinois. And he puts the whole thing about age, I believe, in the proper perspective. And he says, "Hi, I'm so-and-so, and I'm 9 years old. I'm in the 3rd grade at such and such a school in Illinois. I wish you could come. Just recently I had to do a biography report, and I picked you because I wanted to learn about the first American to orbit Earth. I loved reading about your life. When I had to do my presentation, I made a poster and dressed up like an astronaut." He asks a couple of more questions, and then he finishes with this, which I think is a classic. He says, "I'm glad you're still alive, because a lot of my classmates' biography choices are already dead. I hope you write back." I would only add that letter got the fastest reply that I have any letter for a long time. Yeah. Well, I'll try and keep my remarks short because I realize I'm the only thing that's standing between you and dessert, and I know where the priorities may lie with this group. But the importance of some of the things going on in the world are brought home in a book I just started reading. I'm just partway through it. Some of you may have read some of the writings of Joe Nye, who was in the State Department. He was dean of the Kennedy School at Harvard at one time, and a very thoughtful person. And he wrote on the issue of soft power not long ago, and I'm sure many of you read that particular book, soft power being the power to influence other than using military power. And he writes in his new book, which is called The Future of Power, and he talks about, in the different centuries, who led and why. And I think it has a lesson for us maybe here today. He talks about Spain in the 16th century with colonies and gold, the Netherlands in the 17th century with trade and finance, France in the 18th century, the population had grown, they had a military. In the 19th century, the British Industrial Revolution, navy and colonies all over the place. In the 20th century, US and Russia had nuclear power, industrial capacity, and military arms beyond anything anybody had ever thought about. And now here we are in the 21st century. And what will lead us to either be a following nation or a leadership nation in this 21st century we're in? He terms it the information age, the information age. And the information age is literally changing the world. The science and technology, the engineering, the math, the STEM group, as we term it these days, which is a shorthand for it, is changing the world. And if we doubt that, think of what's happening with what we call the Arab Spring right now. The Arab Spring with people revolting against their oppressive regimes is not occurring because we had a CIA that was over there with subversive activity in these societies. No, it's occurring, I think most people would agree, because there's now more flow of information. You go to those countries and you see kids walking down the street in Cairo or Damascus or someplace else with a cell phone up to their head and maybe texting. And on Ohio State campus down here, they may be talking to some kids there outside our office on the campus. And during break and they're in between classes, it's hardly safe to drive because of kids walking across the street, texting to each other, not looking at anything. And that's going on all over the world. And so science and technology is forming a new basis for what people think beyond just the usual newspapers that we have had in the past. The information flow is universal. As an example, I got a new computer not a couple of years back, and it was just a regular computer I bought and had them come over and install the thing on the desk. And then I had a problem with it. And the little problem I had, there was on the instruction sheet, there was a thing about calling a certain number, a long distance number, if I had any problem, and they would try and answer my question. I dialed the number, courteous voice answered, and I talked to this person for a while. The person seemed to have a little bit of an accent. And you can know what happened now. When I finally said, "Where are you located?" he was in India. In India. And I was talking to a person who was giving me my instruction. That's the extent to which we've gone now in this flow of information around the world. If we go back in this country's our own history, go back to the Revolutionary War, how did this country become a world leader in just about 125 years, a little more than a blink in the eye of history? What came about, I think, because of basically two very fundamental things. Number one was education in this country was not just for the kids from the castle or the rich kids or the politically connected. It was for everybody. And we wound up with the best educated general citizenry of any nation in history. And then the second element was we put more into basic research, into fundamental research of learning the new things first. And with that educated citizenry, away we went. And in that blink of history of 125 years, we became the world leader. And I think the same thing applies today to other nations that are now emulating what the United States did, and they're outdoing us. I hate to say that, but in the K-12 education, we still lead by a margin in higher education. In K-12, though, which is what we expect everyone to have, general citizenry, everyone to have, in that area, we are no longer the world's leader in how we're educating our people in those STEM areas of science, technology, engineering, and math. All progress is based on curiosity. Somebody has to wonder about how can we do something differently? How can we discover something new? If we can do some research, maybe it would enable us then to do A or B or C or something like that. And all programs are based on curiosity. Your purpose here at the Great Lakes Science Center and the NASA Visitor Center is to not only an interest in what's been done in the past, but it's also to develop curiosity about what can be done and the needs of the future. And that kind of interest in STEM legislation, I don't think there are many things more important than that. And so when we look at the global situation in the U.S. comparison and what you're doing right here with this center and with the inspiration that you're giving to young people, I think is very, very important. I think it's important enough that will we be a leader 50 years from now? Or will we be looking to leadership to China or to India or some other nation that makes the breakthroughs of the day? Our young people will be inspired, and I think space flight in the past, and certainly in my lifetime, has been a great inspiration to many of our young people. And I'm glad that's the case, and we find that when we go talk to schools or whatever. You people here, our hosts in particular tonight, with the NASA Center out here and with Lockheed Martin, you in particular have been dealing with this world of the future. Ray Johnson is here. We were talking at the table this evening. He's the Chief Technology Officer for Lockheed Martin. Travels all over the world looking into new technologies and new scientific breakthroughs and so on. Amazing. And in his biography, there is a section entitled Thought Leadership in some of his international endeavors. Thought Leadership. I would say that could be renamed. It could be called Curiosity Leadership. Curiosity Leadership. Ray Logo couldn't be with us here tonight, but Jim is. He represents Jim Free, who represents NASA out here with us this evening here. And they're in research and technology development, space propulsion, power, communications, aeronautical propulsions, microgravity sciences, of which we need more and more. I wish we were maximizing the research return on the International Space Station more than we are at this time. I think it's the most unique laboratory ever put together by human beings. And so it's all right to explore Mars and to go out on what I would call macro space missions, meaning how far you can go and where people will go. That will always be fascinating to people when we can go to new places in our section of the universe. But also, I think at the same time, we should be looking at the micro explorations, that we've already had some experience in looking into in space in the way of new medicines, new protein crystal growth that lets us do new medical experiments, the studies of aging that occur because there are changes in the human body in space, and some of those same changes occur as part of the natural process of aging here on Earth. Are there similarities that can maybe give us longer-term space flight without problem, and at the same time let us know how to turn off some of the frailties of old age, which I'm very interested in, right here on Earth? And those things are what, to me, are fascinating about what you're doing here. You're encouraging the young people of this area, not just of Cleveland, but of our state and of this whole area, even cross state lines, to come here and be inspired. And that's very worthwhile, and that's the reason that Annie and I are very glad to be here with you this evening. I don't know, with the dessert coming up and the movie later on, some of you will be staying for, I'm sure, or most of you will be, the IMAX show. But it was suggested I open this up for a Q&A, and if you have any questions here, I'd be glad to address those if someone here at our level here for the dinner wants to speak out here and let me know what your feelings are or your question might be. And I'll be glad to repeat it so everyone can hear all over this place. Any questions anybody has?
Right here, sir. Senator, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
We're here in the Great Lakes Science Center, and you're a veteran of the American political system. And it seems that these days in the American politics, being so polarized, that science is sometimes denigrated, or at least there's a desire to sort of pick and choose among scientific findings in order to reinforce particular political views. And I'm wondering what advice you would give us about how we might restore science to a more neutral and useful role in the American political discourse that we are all a part of in one way or another.
That's a very difficult question because we have a lot of problems in the country, and this is one of them. How do we support science, STEM education, and emphasize that for our young people? I think, there's nothing wrong with lawyers. I'm sure there are many lawyers here tonight. Love you all like brothers. But should the Senate be composed of just 2/3 lawyers? And I think that you have to educate those people in addition to others who may not have had experience in some of these areas and have known the thrills of science and of discovery of new things. It's a long-term proposition. I think it's very important. I think that our country will rise or fall over the next half century or so, largely on whether we lead the world. I think the world leadership will go to those who have the best education system and to those who have the best research going on to supplement that education system. Anybody else here?
Senator, we have one final question for you.
My question this evening is, during the President's State of the Union address, he was talking about this being the new Sputnik moment for our generation. My generation didn't have a Sputnik moment. When we're talking about alternative energy generation and our country leading the way into the future, does this feel like a Sputnik moment to you, sir?
It can be. Sputnik was a single event that sort of electrified the world. I don't know that with regard to energy and some of the other problems we had that we're going to have a Sputnik moment in which is sort of an electric spark that ignites our interest enough that the whole world then gets fired up about doing something about it. We're going to have many Sputnik moments, I think, in a number of different areas, particularly in that area of energy. If I had one wish in energy, it would be to have better energy storage, electrical energy storage. I unfortunately am of an age where I have to have hearing aids here now. It's not seriously, but mine supplements some of the higher frequencies you lose as you get older. The little batteries are hardly as big as my little fingernail, and yet they last 5 or 6 days. If we could make that same kind of thing on a huge scale, so you could take the output of a nuclear power plant in off-peak hours, when it normally is not producing as much, and store that energy. We also know how to convert the forces of nature without exception to electricity. Wind, waves, wave power out here in the oceans, tides going up and down. Bay of Fundy, we were up there a couple of years ago, Andy and I looking into some of these things, 28 to 30 foot tides every day going up that bay. Record was 52-foot tide up in there. Think of the energy involved with the zillions of tons of water going up and down twice a day in there if you can harness some of that. But you can't store the energy, so you can use it in the evening during peak hours of 6 to 10 when the highest use of electricity occurs. Right now we store energy only for a very, very short period of time, and we do it sometimes by taking the excess electrical power and pumping water back uphill during non-use hours so you can generate again, and you only get about something like a 12% return on something like that. But if we are to go to an electrical transportation system basically in this country, we need research into that area of batteries for automobiles that will give far more capability than we have now, and also can store big amounts of energy, can store, say, the output of a 1,000 megawatt power plant and store that during non-peak hours. So those are areas I think that are ripe for some of the research of the future that can revolutionize the world. I know that you're anxious to get dessert, and I am too, and so thank you all very much for asking Annie and me to be here this evening. It's a great, good luck to all of you. Thank you. Thank you.
One word to describe John Glenn.
Oh, inspiring and handsome.
Amazing. Amazing man.
Adventurer.
Pioneer. Well, hero. I think hero has to be it.
Patriot. In the finest sense of the word, a patriot.
Hero. Pretty simple.
Service.
Irrepressible.
Humanity.
Amazing.